Michelangelo lowered his head. I am ignorant. I do not read Greek or Latin. Urbino tried for 3 years to teach me, but I was stubborn. I would not learn. I wanted only to draw. Stupido. You have missed my point. No wonder Urbino had trouble teaching you. Drawing is learning. It is discipline, a measuring stick with which to see if there is honesty in you. It's a confessional. It will reveal everything about you while you imagine you are revealing someone else. Drawing is the poet's written line, set down to see if there be a story worth telling, a truth worth revealing. The old man's voice became soft, affectionate. Remember this, filio mio. To draw is to be like God when he put breath into Adam. It is the outer breathing of the artist and the inner breathing of the model that creates a new third life on paper. The act of love, Michelangelo. The art of love, through which everything on earth is born. Yes, drawing was the breath of life. He had known that. Yet for him it was not an end, but a means. He began remaining behind at night, unknown to anyone, picking up tools and working the scraps of stone lying about, yellowish-white travertines from the quarries of Rome, pictra forte from Lombrellino, conglomerate breccia from Impruneta, dark green marble from Prato, mottled reddish-yellow marble from Siena, pink marble from Gavarano, transparent Cipollino marble, blue and white flowered Berdeglio. But his greatest joy came when someone left behind a fragment of pure white Carrara. As a child, he had stood before the marble cutters, hungering to get his hands on this precious stone. It had never been possible. White marble was rare and costly. Only enough was brought in from Carrara and Seravezza to fulfill commissions. Now surreptitiously he began to experiment with the point. The toothed and flat chisels, working surface textures on the marble as he had on Pietra Serena at the Topolino's. It was the finest hour of the day for him, alone in the garden, with only the statues for company. Soon, he must have these tools in his hand for good. He must be able to pick them up first thing in the morning, because they were his natural appendages. Like arms and legs, he always remembered when dark fell to chisel off the contours he had worked, so no one would know to clear away his chips, throwing them into the stone pile in their far end of the garden. Inevitably, he was caught. But by the last person he would have expected to surprise him. Contessina de' Medici came to the garden nearly every day now, if not with Lorenzo, then with Poliziano, or Ficino, or Pico della Mirandola, his father's Platonic scholars. She spoke with Granacci, with Sansovino and Rustici, whom she apparently had known a long time, but no one introduced Michelangelo. She never spoke to him. He knew instantly, without catching sight of the quick-moving figure or the face that was all eyes. When she entered the gate, he felt a heightened consciousness as though all movement around him, even of the sun and air, had been speeded up. It was Contessina, who freed Granacci from the drudgery of stone. He spoke to her of his feelings. She told her father. One day Lorenzo came into the garden and said, "Granacci, I'd like a big panel, a triumph of Paul Emilius. Would you undertake to paint it?" "Would I? When need is highest, help is nighest." When Lorenzo turned aside, Granacci pressed his left hand to his lips and fluttered the fingers to Contessina in gratitude. She never paused to look at Michelangelo's work. Always. She stopped at Torrigani's table, standing at the far side of the desk so that she was facing Michelangelo. And he could see her every gesture, hear her laughter as Torrigiani amused her. Though he watched, fascinated, their eyes never met. When at length she left, he found himself emotionally exhausted. He could not understand this. He cared nothing for girls. Not even a year of Jacopo's tutelage had led him to discern which were matressable. There were no girls in his family, none in their small circle of friends. He could hardly remember having talked to one. He had never even wanted to sketch one. They were alien to him. Then why was it painful when he saw her laughing in comradeship with Torrigiani, only a few feet away? Why did he become furious with Torrigiani and with her? What could she mean to him, this princess of the noble Medici blood? It was a kind of mysterious malady. He wished she would stay away from the garden, leave him in peace. Restici said she seldom used to come. Why now, every day, staying for an hour or more? The more passionately he threw himself at the blank pages, the more conscious he was of her standing shivering at Torrigiani's workbench, flirting with the beautiful muscular athlete, while somehow seeing and absorbing his own everyday stroke of the charcoal like a personal affront. It was a long time, deep into the heat of summer, with the wildflowers dead and the garden meadows burned down, before he realized that he was jealous of Torrigiani, jealous of Contessina, jealous of the two of them together, jealous of each of them separately apart. He was appalled. And now she had discovered him in the garden after the others left. She was with her brother Giovanni, the fat one with the cast in his eye. About his own age, 14, Michelangelo would have guessed already a cardinal-elect, and her cousin, the illegitimate son of Lorenzo's beloved brother Giuliano, stabbed to death in the Duomo by Pazzi conspirators. Michelangelo had been only 3 at the time, but Florentine still talked of the sight of the conspirators hanging from the windows of the Signoria. The first word slipped out unannounced. Buonasera. Buonasera, Michelangelo. Contessina. Come va? This was Contessina. Non c'è male. Like a Settignano stonemason, he had been carving a herringbone pattern on a piece of pietra serena. He did not stop working. The stone has a smell of freshly picked figs, and this. She pointed to a piece of marble on the bench beside him. Does it smell of freshly pickled plums? No, it has hardly any. He chipped a piece. Here, smell for yourself. She crinkled her nose, laughing at him. He set himself before the marble, began raining blows with the chisel that sent the chips flying. Why do you work so furiously? Doesn't it exhaust you? It would me. He knew of her frailty, the consumption in her family that had taken her mother and sister within the past year. That was why Lorenzo was so devoted to her. Restici said because she was not long for this world. No. Cutting stones does not take strength out of you. It puts it back in. Here, try working this white marble. You'll be amazed at how alive it comes under your hands. Under your hands, Michelangelo. Will you finish that design on the pietra serena for me? But it is nothing. Just herringbone such as we curve for garden walks. Or cistern covers. I like it. Then I will finish. She stood still just above him as he crouched over the stone. When he came to a hard spot, he looked around for a bucket of water, saw none, spat precisely on the area he wanted to soften, then continued the sweep of the chisel over the stone. Amused, she asked, "What do you do when you run dry?" He gazed up at her, his face flushed. No good Scapolino ever ran out of spit. With the first intense, locked-in heat of the garden came the first casualty, Soji. His enthusiasm had been withering like the grass of the meadow. He won no prizes or commissions, and although Bertoldo had been paying him a few coins, his earnings were higher only than Michelangelo's, which were non-existent. For this reason, Soji thought that Michelangelo might join with him. One breathless evening late in August, he waited until everyone had left, then flung down his tools and came to the newest apprentice. "Michelangelo, let's you and I get out of here. All this stuff is so So impractical. Let's save ourselves while there is still time. Save ourselves, Soji. From what? Look, don't be blind. They're never going to give us any commissions or money. Who really needs sculpture in order to live? I do. The emotions of disgust, renunciation, and even fear carved on Soji's face were more eloquent than anything the lad had been able to work into his wax or clay models. Where are we going to find work if Lorenzo should die? But he's a young man, only 40. Then we would have no more patron, no more garden. Are we to wander about Italy like beggars with hats in our hands? Do you need a marble cutter? Could you use a Madonna, a Pieta? I can make you one, if only you'll give me a roof and victuals. Soji swept his few personal possessions into a bag. Mache, I want to be in a trade where folks come to me every day for pasta or pork, for wine or calzone. People can't live without these things. Every day they must buy, so every day I must sell. On what I sell I will live. I have a practical nature. I have to know each day I will earn so many soldi. Sculpture is the last of the luxuries, on the very bottom of the list. I want to trade in something on the top of the list. What do you say, Michelangelo? They haven't paid you a single scudo. Look how ragged your clothes are. Do you want to live like a pauper all your life? Quit now with me. We'll find jobs together. Soji's outburst was deeply felt. It had been building up for weeks, perhaps months. Yet at the back of his mind, Michelangelo was a little amused. Sculpture is at the top of my list, Soji. In fact, there is no list. I say sculpture, and I'm finished. Finished is right, agreed Soji. My father knows a butcher on the Ponte Vecchio who is looking for help. The chisel, it's just like a knife. Next morning, when Bertoldo heard of Soji's departure, he shrugged. The casualties of sculpture. Everyone is born with a little talent, or with most people, how quickly the flame flickers out. He ran a hand resignedly through his thin white hair. We always had this in the studios. You start out knowing that a certain amount of teaching will be wasted, but you can't withhold for that reason, or all your apprentices will suffer. These Soji, their prompting is not love or affinity for sculpture, but the exuberance of youth. As soon as this first flush begins to fade, they say to themselves, stop dreaming. Look for a reliable way of life. When you are the master of a bottega, you will find this to be true. Sculpture is hard, brutal labor. One should not become an artist because he can, but because he must. It is only for those who would be miserable without it. The next morning, moon-faced Bugiardini, no taller but plumper, arrived at the new apprentice for the garden. Michelangelo and Granacci embraced him warmly. Granacci, having completed his painting for Lorenzo, had shown so much talent and organization that Lorenzo had asked him to become the manager of the garden. He enjoyed being an executive, spending his days making sure that the proper stone, iron or bronze arrived, setting up contests for the apprentices, getting modest commissions from the guilds. Granacci, you mustn't, protested Michelangelo. You have as much talent as anybody in this garden, but I enjoy it, replied Granacci mildly. Then stop enjoying it. If we need charcoal or a model, let us get them for ourselves. Why should you give up your own work to help us get ours done? Granacci was not insensible to the compliment embedded in Michelangelo's fury. There's time for everything, caro mio, replied. I have painted. I will paint again. But when Granacci returned to painting, Michelangelo was angrier than ever, for Lorenzo had pressed him into the service to design stage settings for a morality play, banners and arches for a pageant. Granacci, idiota! How can you stand here singing so happily, painting carnival decorations that will be thrown out the day after the pageant? But I like doing what you call trivia. Everything doesn't have to be profound and eternal. A pageant or a party are important because people get pleasure from them, and pleasure is one of the most important things in life, as important as food or drink or art. You, Florentine. As the days of fall deepened, so did Michelangelo's friendships. On feast days or church holidays, when the garden was locked tight, Rustici invited him for dinner, then took him through the countryside looking for horses, paying farmers, stablemen, grooms for the privilege of drawing in their barns and fields. Horses are the most beautiful of God's creatures, exclaimed Rustici. You must draw them over and over again, every horse you can find. But Rustici, I never intend to sculpture a horse, only men. Once you know a horse, you know the world. Sansovino, the contadino from Arezzo, twice Michelangelo's age, had his own philosophy. An artist must return frequently to the soil. He must plow it, sow it, weed it, harvest the grain. The contact with the earth renews us. To be only an artist is to feed on oneself and go barren. That is why I ride my mule home to Arezzo every few weeks. You must come with me, Michelangelo, and feel the tilled earth under your feet. I'd like to visit Arezzo with you, Sansovino. If there's any marble I can plow a furrow through. It was only at home that he was unhappy. Ludovico had managed to keep a rough check on how much each of the apprentices at the garden was receiving of prize money, awards, and commissions. He knew that Sansovino, Torrigiani, and Granacci were earning good sums. But not you, Ludovico demanded. Not one single scudo? Not yet. After a full 8 months, why the others and not you? I don't know. I can only come to one conclusion, that you can't compete with the others. I have not. Wouldn't Lorenzo know if you had any talent as a sculptor? Undoubtedly. But he has never noticed you. Never. Oh, Laura, I'll give you another 4 months to take it a full year. Then if Lorenzo still thinks you're a dry fruit, you'll go to work. But Ludovico's patience lasted only 4 weeks. He cornered Michelangelo in his bedroom of a Sunday morning. Does Bertoldo praise your work? No. Does he say you have talents? No. He gives no encouragement. He gives me instruction. It's not the same thing. Amenso admitted. Does he praise the others? Sometimes. Could it be you have the least promise? It could not be. Why not? I draw better than they. Draw? What does that mean? If they are training you to be a sculptor, why don't you sculpture? Bertoldo won't let me. Why not? He says I'm not ready. But the others sculpture? Yes. Can't you see what they want, what that means? No. It means that you have less ability than they. That will be proved when I get my hands on stone. When will that be? I don't know. Until you work the stone, you can earn no return. No. And they know no sign of letting you start on the stone. None. Doesn't it look hopeless to you? No. Then how does it look? Puzzling. And how long can you remain there puzzled? As long as Bertoldo thinks I should. What has happened to your pride? Nothing. The same as has happened to you in the garden. Nothing. What does not lose pride while learning? You are almost 15 now. Are you to earn nothing forever? I will earn. When? How? I don't know. 2 dozen times you've said no. Or, I don't know. When will you know? I don't know. Exhausted Ludovico cried. I should beat you with a stick. When will you get some sense in your head? I'm doing what I must. That is sense. Ludovico slumped into a chair. Leonardo wants to become a monk. Whoever heard of Buonarroti, a monk? You want to become an artist. Whoever heard of Buonarroti, an artist? Giovan Simone wants to become a street rowdy, stoning passers-by. Whoever heard of Buonarroti, a malandrino? Urbino has sent Sigismondo back saying I am wasting my money. He cannot learn his letters. Whoever heard of Buonarroti as illiterate? I don't know any more what a man has sons for. Michelangelo walked over to Ludovico's chair and put a finger lightly on his father's shoulder. Trust me, father. I am not looking for wool on an ass. Affairs grew no better for him at the garden. They seemed indeed to become worse. Bertoldo was pushing him hard, never pleased with anything. He did, jumping from one foot to the other, crying, "No, you can do it better, again," making him redraw models from a ladder above them, the floor beneath, and at the end of a week obliging him to come in on a holiday to create a theme that would embrace all the figures he had sketched during the week. Walking home with Granacci at night, Michelangelo cried in anguish, "Why am I discriminated against?" "You're not," replied Granacci. "But anyone can see it. I am not permitted to enter any of the competitions for Lorenzo's prize money or work on any of the commissions. I'm not permitted to visit the palace and see that the art works. You're manager of the garden now. Speak to the Bertoldo. Help me. When Bertoldo considers you ready to enter contests, he'll say so. Until then..." "Oh, Dio," swore Michelangelo under his breath. "Until then, I'll be sleeping in the Loggia della Signoria, where my father can't get at me with a stick." There was something else he was unhappy about, but could not mention to Granacci. With the wet weather, Lorenzo had forbidden Contessina to leave the palace. To Michelangelo, she did not seem frail. He felt a flame in her, a flame strong enough to consume death. Now that she no longer came, the garden seemed strangely empty, the days long and unbroken without the excitement of waiting. In his loneliness, he turned to Torrigiani. They became inseparable. Michelangelo raved about Torrigiani, of his wit, his flair, his physique. Granacci raised an eyebrow. "Michelangelo, I am in a difficult position. I can't say too much without appearing jealous and hurt, but I must warn you, Torrigiani has done this before." "Done what?" "Lavished his affection. Won someone over completely, only to fly into a rage and break off the relationship when there is someone new to romance. Torrigiani needs an audience. You are providing him with that audience. Do not confuse this use with loving you." Bertoldo was not so gentle. When he saw a drawing of Michelangelo's in which he had imitated one that Torrigiani had just completed, he tore it into 100 shreds. "Walk with a cripple for a year, and at the end you will limp. Move your desk back where it belongs."